At one point in history, these boots were sold as gardening boots to old women. Their comfortable soles were great for grandma as she yanked the latest yield from the soil and displayed her bundle of carrots like the decapitated head of a king. Doc Martens' flagship factory is located in Cobbs Lane, Wollaston. This is where they make their flagship boots, the best of the best. However, if you walk 7 minutes southeast, you'll see the Solovair factory, where they make better boots that are $41 cheaper. Today we'll be looking at why Solovair makes a comfier boot that's better for your foot, a more weather-resistant boot, and a boot that theoretically could live with you for your entire life. However, they are not perfect, so I'll also give you a brief warning and word of advice so you can avoid disaster, much like me.
A battle old as time, Solovair versus Doc Martens. What is better and why? What is worse and why? The answer is Solovair is better and Doc Martens is worse. This video is sponsored by Magic Spoon, and if you like what I'm wearing, it just happens to be all Huckberry today, 45T and 365 pant. You can check out the carrot link in the bio to see every doodad that I have on my body. Also, I look puffy because I didn't bring a bag with me today, so I have all my camera equipment in my pockets. Chapter 1. Sole construction. Quick history lesson. If you have Doc Martens or Solovair, you'll notice sole of air. It's very important that there's air in the sole. Why is that? Well, it's because when they were first invented, really what you had was leather soles, and then sometimes under that leather, on the actual ground, you had rubber. So the soles of footwear was just generally very hard, very high impact on the ground. And then Doc Martens and Solovair, their brilliant thing was, well, no, these are gonna be cushy and padded, so when you walk on them, they're a lot more comfortable, and there's a lot less impact on the ground. Now it's 2023, and both of these companies have essentially the same outsoles. Not the same insoles or midsoles, but outsoles are very, very similar, except Solovairs are heavier, they're a little thicker. This is both with the made in England Doc Martens, which are more expensive than the Solovairs, and made in Thailand Doc Martens, which are cheaper than the Solovairs. So you get more rubber, which is really good. Now, when we look at the midsole, you get different things with different boots. The cheapest Doc Martens, you get foam midsoles, which I talked about before. These are easier to crush than felted midsoles. You get felted midsoles on made in England Doc Martens, and you get thicker, heavier, more robust felted midsoles on Solovair. And really why that's great is just because it's more padding for your feet. It takes longer to crush down a thicker midsole. It's harder to crush that down. If it's cold outside, you have more insulation so your feet stay warmer, especially if you're, walking on snow or ice or something like that. Michael, you said outsole, midsole. What about the insole? Cheapest Doc Martens, there's virtually no insole.
Oops, sorry, that is incorrect. There is an insole, and it's either very, very similar to the made in England ones, or it's the exact same.
And then with the Solovairs, there is no insole. I don't really know. It looks like there's a half insole that's glued down to the boot. There's a heel pad, which is great, but insoles are kind of the last thing that people worry about, because that's basically like if you bought a house and someone was like, this is how the foundation is built, this is how the basement is built, and then you said, well, what about the rugs on the inside? The person would be like, well, you could change those pretty easily. That's nothing major to the structure of the entire house. If you're familiar with the construction of these boots, when I'm talking about outsoles and all that, you probably think it's weird that I left out the most important part of these boots, the Solovairs. But don't worry, I didn't. I'm gonna talk about that later. But for now, we move on to part 2. Leather. Ugh. This video is sponsored by Magic Spoon. Listen, we're not babies anymore. We're practically full-grown adults. I'm almost 30. I'm 27 years old. And when I wake up in the morning, I still want a big bowl of cereal, but I can't do with all the sugar and lack of protein and gluten. That sends me straight to the bathroom. But not anymore with Magic Spoon. Feast your eyes on fruity-flavored Magic Spoon. It tastes just like the cereal you had growing up as a kid, but this time, mommy's not serving it to you before school. Magic Spoon says they are the high-protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, wheat-free, naturally flavored, totally delicious childlike cereal for grown-ups. And it doesn't only come in fruity flavors, of course, even though that's my favorite. It also comes in cocoa, frosted, and a ton of others that you should definitely check out on their website. And you can use my code SNAIL5 to save 5% off of your first order. Oh, here comes the airplane. If you're anything like me and you love cereal, but you want to add more protein to your diet in the morning, Magic Spoon is that guy. So thank you, Magic Spoon, for sponsoring this video. I love you long time. I have had your cereal plenty of times before, and I will continue to have your cereal, even if you refuse to sell it to me. I'll find a way. The first thing is origin of the leather. Solovair says they source all of their leather from European tanneries, and Doc Marten says, oh, the leather? That's from like cows. They say they source it from Asia or South America, which is That's like saying we source it from the world. So not a lot of information there, but what you can deduce is that they don't really differentiate where they get their made in England leather versus where they get the leather that's used on boots that are made in Thailand, which is what I was saying last video. I kind of am theorizing that it's the same leather, just with a different finish on top. So we shall think of leather quality in terms of a ratio between how much plastic is on the leather and how much plastic is not on the leather. And that actually has to do with how much of the leather is getting sanded down. Sanding is basically the essence of all things leather. So an unsanded leather is full grain leather. That is the top of the top, the most quality leather that you see. It ages really well, it patinas beautifully, but it's harder to get perfect sections of that because animals get scratched and bit by bugs and stuff like that, so it costs more. Then you have top grain leather where you sand the top of the leather off and you put a coating over that leather, so you're covering up all of the imperfections and stuff like that. Now, the main difference here is that Solovair does use full grain leather, and maybe Doc Marten uses full grain leather on some of their models, but on their general made in England and their 1460s made in Thailand, they don't. And Solovair usually does on certain models, which we'll get into now. Why does that matter at all? And the reason it matters is because boots with a top coat have a little bit more water resistant than boots without, because you're literally covering your boots in plastic. Obviously that'll wear away over time and become less water resistant, but that's really just kind of turning a negative into a positive, because really what's happening is you're keeping anything that you could add to the boots to condition them over time so they don't break down as fast as the fibers of the leather rub against each other when they dry out. You're keeping that away too.
Quick note, the leather is not completely impenetrable, so Wonder Bomb will help, but it's not going to be as effective as on a full grain leather, and the top coat is so thin that it still may crack anyway.
So there's not really a practical reason why you'd ever want a heavy top coat over the leather of your boots. Makes them easier to shine, but at what cost? And it's just a cheaper leather. What you're looking at now from the Solovairs, from the 8-eye derby boots, is called greasy leather. That is a full grain leather with wax applied over it. And that does the best of both worlds. You get the weather resistance that you would get from a plastic top coat, but it's waxed full grain leather. So the leather, when you wax it, does get reconditioned and stuff like that, depending on the wax that you use. It's more resistant to the elements, and it's full grain, so it won't flake and look kind of gross. It'll look cooler over time, especially with a bunch of layers of wax kind of caked over it as the years go by.
However, you can get Solovairs that are not full grain, and you can get Doc Martens that are full grain, so make sure you do your research before you buy the boots.
And now, without further ado, the great shank debate. If you don't know what a shank is, pretend I said to you that I needed you to lay from this to this. You could do it, but not probably for very long, because the middle part of you would get tired. Now pretend I added wood right here. Then you could kind of do it for way, way longer. You'd probably still get tired, but the difference between no wood and some wood would be huge. That's what a shank is, but instead of having to do it with your full body, you have to do it with your foot when you're wearing a heeled boot or something of the sort. But a lot of people do not like that Solovair made this little piece out of wood. Solovair says this about their shanks in their boots. We use a beech wood shank, sourced sustainably and specifically engineered for our boots. A lot of the times when people are opening up boots to repair them or whatever reason, the wooden shank is split. So people are always saying, Solovair, why don't you use a steel shank or a carbon shank or a shank like that that's never gonna break? And Solovair fights them all, and they say this: look, we engineered these shanks specifically for our boots. They are lighter and more comfortable than steel shanks because they have a little bit of flex, and they are still strong, and your foot is gonna break long before the shank is gonna break, so you have nothing to worry about. To which the internet, a bunch of people that don't make boots, said, no, you're wrong. I can snap wood with my hand, and I cannot snap steel with my hand, so I want steel shanks. And Solovair said, no, you don't. To which someone else replied, Alan Edmonds uses wooden shanks and those always snap. To which Solovair, in the coolest way ever, replied, well, that's Alan Edmonds. We're Solovair. Hey, quick note on sizing. When I did the Doc Martens Made in England review, they sent me a size too small of the Made in England boots, but then Solovair, this time, they sent me the right size, but they were like clown shoes. They were really, really big. So maybe size down to half size. Do some research. Look in the comments below because people will say how they sized, but definitely be careful how you size. Remember in the beginning when I was talking about soles and I said there was something very important that I was going to talk about later? Later is now. The outsole of a Doc Marten, you're very familiar with the yellow stitching. Solovair can't do yellow stitching. They used to license from Doc Marten and then they could essentially do everything and make the shoes look exactly like Doc Martens. Now they can't. But what's different between Doc Martens and Solovair is that stitch on Doc Martens is very important. However, on Solovair, That's not the case, and that's a very, very important thing when you're talking about the life cycle of these boots.
Okay, essentially what I'm trying to say is this. The yellow stitching on Doc Martens is real, and it connects a piece of rubbery plastic to the bottom of the boot, aka the welt. That rubbery piece of plastic is then melted to the outsole of the boot, and that makes the boot. The Solovair is a very similar construction, but the stitching you see is actually fake, and the real stitching of that piece of plastic is hidden behind the fake stitching. I would assume this is to protect those very important stitches and to make repairing a bit easier by keeping the welt in better condition.
And on top of that, if you wanted to get new soles for your Doc Martens, you're basically out of luck. There's one guy in England, I think, that will mail you some if you pay for them, but you're kind of screwed. Solovair, on the other hand, has their soles available on their website that you could order and repair yourself, or Solovair will do it themselves. So that is why these boots have a way, way higher lifespan than Doc Martens. That there is one little thing that Doc Marten beats Solovair on. Are you familiar with the concept of a lemon? Not a lemon as in the fruit, but a lemon as in you buy a product from the manufacturer and it's just not right, like stuff is just broken immediately. I got lemons. The 8-eye derby boots that I got were not lemons, but what the lemons were my first purchase ever from Solovair, these greasy monkey boots, which they were fantastic, and I wore them to Denmark for 7 days. And within those 7 days, the back tab on the back of one of the boots ripped off immediately, and then the laces on the right side of the boots also ripped off. And I was not worried because I was like, I definitely got a lemon. I thought that was an isolated incident, and I'm pretty sure it was. Except one thing, I'm not worried about the pull tabs, but the laces. The reason I think that the laces ripped is because Doc Martens, the inside of their eyelets is a smooth circle. Solovair's is not. It looks like a bunch of pieces all pried back, and I thought it was a lemon on the monkey boots, but then when I was lacing these boots and I pulled the laces, I could hear the fibers of the laces getting caught a little bit, and I feel like over time they would just do the same thing and rip again. So that's my only gripe with Solovair's. But overall, the master plan comes together, because if you're saying, do I go Made in England Doc Martens or do I go Solovair's? Remember when I made the Made in England Doc Martens video and I said there was like $60 to $40 unaccounted for that was just kind of like Doc Martens adding stuff to the price? Well, munch on this. The Solovair's are $40 cheaper, and I think that's essentially what you're getting. You're getting a better boot that costs less with no artificial Doc Martens markup. So anyways, that is the end of the video. Now I'm just driving home back to New York, and I will see you all next week. It's another boot video, which is very exciting, but then I have some other cool stuff, or I think it's cool stuff planned, and hopefully I'll be showing you